Hello, everybody. Welcome to the. Sorry about the lateness there. We're trying to figure out the internet. There was a little bit of a delay. Welcome to the Tigers Minor League Report podcast. The first half, as we wrap up the first half of the season, I'm Rogelio. Alongside is Chris Brown. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or listen to podcasts. And of course, you can find us at tigersmlreport.com. And so we have dropped a couple articles recently. The Max Clark Scouting report you can find on there. We also have an article on Kiter Montero. In addition to, there's going to be a first half article kind of summarizing the first half. That's going to probably drop tomorrow when I finish up here tonight. So, plenty to get to. We did get some suggestions. We asked some of our listeners to give us their most surprising player, disappointing player, favorite player in the system in the first half of the season. So we'll cover all that here shortly. But Chris, how goes it on with a night with no baseball and pretty much had one of the probably worst nights of the week, or worst nights of the year as far as sports goes, because right now it's all reality TV that's running right now, and there's really nothing interesting on.
I don't mind the break. Sometimes it's fun to have 5 different baseball games going on a night and trying to catch clips here and there. But sometimes it's nice to sit and watch a movie with your son. So that's what we were doing tonight. Yeah,
Nice.
so I dug that. But eager for the games to get going again because I want to see how these guys do in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I had softball earlier. We lost nine
Oh
to
no!
five, I think it was. But I got to play the field today. It was a little bit, so that was nice. It was nice to get out there. I turned to double play. So yeah,
Softball double play, nice.
yeah, flipped it to Cody. Cody got him at first. So, but yeah, there is. Yeah, this is it is a desert, as Sean would say. Hello, Kyle, and YouTube chat as well. It's kind of one of those nights where, I mean, earlier today I did the most work I did in a long since I started. I had a lot of little things to do, but yeah, there was a lot of also looking at clips and looking at some of the things that stood out to me in the first half of the season and some moments. We talk about Cole keeping for the cycle. That was a huge moment. And
Yeah.
we're another, looking at some pitching performances. Montero's 11 strikeouts. Of course, Tigers no hitter on Saturday,
Yeah.
and they open up the season tomorrow against Seattle. So the big club, and then Toledo. There's some highlights in Toledo too. There's a little bit of highlights everywhere. Lakeland as well, as much as we can. So we did confirm though, Lakeland. By the way, if you were not, we talked about this in the last podcast. Lakeland will start showing games next year. So finally, we get to see a little
And
overdue.
and a good year to do it because they're going to have a lot of interesting young guys from this draft, presumably, playing there next year.
Yeah, and there's gonna be, especially even a guy like your boy Hosgu
Josue Briseño.
Briseño. Yeah,
Yeah,
Briseño,
we'll
who's
see.
pretty impressive. 30 for 77, batting 390 in Complex League right now, killing it.
With
So
power and walks, yeah, it's
yeah,
yeah, he may be worthy of a bump to low A right now, but that's a pretty big jump, one of the biggest in the minors.
can you imagine if he spends a couple weeks at low A and then they put him at West Michigan before the end of the season?
Well, then you'd probably have something there.
Yeah,
I can't remember the last time they did that with an 18-year-old. Riley Green, I guess. Although no, that was when West Michigan was still low A. So
yeah, that would be sweet. Ideally, it would be awesome to see kind of like, but again, wishful thinking. By the way, next weekend we'll be in South Bend, Indiana, to watch the Whitecaps play. Are we going Friday and Saturday, or just going Friday?
I don't know. I guess we had
Thought
to
the
figure that out
thought
with our host.
yeah. So shout out to Charlie, who is over on Discord. He's going to have us out there for the South Bend Cubs and West Michigan Whitecaps on Friday. I think we're going Saturday. I'm not 100% yet. But next week also is Sabre Conference for the Negro Leagues over here in Hamtramck. So there's going to be that going on all weekend as well. So I'm supposed to be volunteering one of the days. We'll see what happens, how that goes.
Nice.
But let's start with Toledo. And so one of the things that about Toledo this year is it's probably the most unique in the sense that I'm trying to be as polite about this as possible because for the most part, positional player wise, it's been pretty much the same. Good evening, Stan. We did get your. By the way, Stan had a good question. We got, and we'll be addressing that question. So if you did email us, I'll your list. We'll also be putting that up here shortly. So we'll be talking about that in a second. But yes, um, Toledo position wise, Chris has probably been the most consistent of the three of among the four affiliates.
In terms of the roster makeup, or
Yeah, in
just
terms of a roster
yeah,
makeup from a positional side.
yeah, and it's no secret to Tigers fans that the guys that they want called up have not been called up yet, and those have been the most common players there. We've seen a little bit of movement. Steele Walker was supposed to be there, got hurt, came back, got hurt again, got released. Matt Witherspoon was up there, or Grant Witherspoon, I'm sorry, was called up, but he's not playing a ton. But mostly, yeah, it's the guys we thought we'd see there in the field for the most part. There's Malloy has been playing tons of third base. Now they've put him in the outfield. You had Lipsius playing a lot of second base, first base, some left field. Donnie Sands, Parker Meadows has been there all year. So yeah, a lot of the sort of same faces over the first couple months. And first month was great, and then the last two were not so much. Although Meadows has finally picked things up, which is nice to see.
Yeah, Parker Meadows right now batting 260, 330, 462 with an ISO over 200, which is nice to see. And he's walking at a nice 10% clip. Strikeout rate's about 20%. But in terms of power, he is, I believe, third among all the Tigers in home runs. But I guess again, the splits against lefties is where we're talking about here. But on the pitching side, this is where I had just I was trying to come up with things to talk about for Toledo. There's really not much in terms of because if you look at Toledo, by the way, has used 30 pitchers this year. 30, which is if you think about Toledo over the last couple of years, I mean that number seems is that just me or I mean in terms of I don't know, it just seems like an unusually high number, or am I just
No,
imagining
there's
that?
I think there's usually about 70 in a year. Maybe I'm just thinking of players in general. Maybe 30 is high for pitchers, but yeah, it does feel a little bit higher than usual. So maybe you're right there. Maybe I'm thinking just total players in the roster because they've had very few consistent starting pitchers there.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of guys going 3 innings, 2 innings, 4 innings, and it's really been a mishmash of arms down there. So it's hard to pick out anybody who's really succeeded. Brendan White came up eventually. He wasn't having the best numbers statistically, but some of that seemed to be bad luck. And Reese Olson also, wasn't pitching terribly well in Toledo and got the call and has been better in Detroit. So I don't know what's going on down there, but it's been a struggle.
So last year they used 30 pitchers total.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's why I
that's
thought that number seemed little high
yeah. I
for
think
that.
I was thinking I must have been thinking because I feel like there's usually about 70 player season, so that's probably what I was thinking. But it was 70 players total, not 70 pitchers. 70 pitchers seemed a little bit absurd.
And same thing with same exact number for 2021 too. So they've already used 30 pitchers already. But yeah, looking at that, we'll look at. I wanted to start with the pitching because I mean the batters again. Justin Malloy stands out. Somebody mentioned earlier on Discord that the amount of home runs he had over certain at bats versus last year, which is a thing to stand out because he also moved up 3 levels last year. So we'll go back to that in a second. But no, it's as far as pitching goes for Toledo, you can there's one starter that I think goes to me under the radar or continues to kind of go on the radar. They did an article on him a couple days ago, and I'm kind of glad they did, and that's Jack Olothagan. And the reason why I stand that out is because he went from he went to high A to triple A. And I know we've talked about this before, Chris, about possibly him being maybe more or less possibly an org but at the same time, in terms of his numbers in Toledo alone, he is, like I said, velocity. We've talked about this before. His velocity's up. So he's 1-2 with a K per nine of 8.21, and he has a ERA of 5.03, but FIP is 4.11, which is actually one of the better FIPs on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, Chris, in terms of like giving up home runs, this is where kind of he's only given up two the entire season, two in over 60 innings of work, two in AAA, and he didn't give up any in high A.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a skill, right? Sometimes it's luck, but a lot of times it is a skill, or it has to do with your pitch shape. Like Wilmer Flores hasn't given up very many home runs this year, and Spencer Turnbull never gave up home runs in the minor league. Sometimes it's just the way your pitches move. So maybe there's something to Lachlan there. I think it's kind of funny. You can be an org guy and also be a future big leaguer. Uh, and Lachlan reminds me of Warwick Saupold, who was an org guy. We never ranked him anywhere when I was at Tigstown for years. He was in the system forever. Never we did top 50 prospects. Never sniffed it, but he had a big league career because he could pitch a little. I don't think he was ever terribly good in the big leagues, but it's very possible that Lachlan does get a chance in the big leagues because it's a good enough arm. It's a low 90s fastball with some sink, and he's got some feel for spinning the ball. So yeah, it is kind of an interesting case where it doesn't feel like he's a priority prospect. I think that's why he got bumped from skipped over Double A, because that's just an unusual thing to do for anybody who you believe is a priority prospect. But it doesn't mean he's not a future big leaguer.
You know what though? It's one of those things too where even he's Rule 5 eligible, and Sean and Chad asked about who might go to Arizona Fall League. That's a possibility. He might be showcased to eventually be traded, or who knows. But he is he is a player that's Rule 5 eligible.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, typically we see the pitchers who go to Arizona Fall League are guys who missed part of the year with injury and are coming back. So, I mean, not to spoil anything from later, but it's possible you see Jackson Jobe in the Arizona Fall League this year, or maybe Dylan Smith if he comes back healthy. I don't know. So that's a speculation, but it's kind of fun to think about.
So I'm sorry, I had that wrong. They've used 39 pitchers this
39.
year. 39 pitchers, and I'm going to go back to last year for a moment because I forgot to look through the other side of the there's of course always two pages of this thing. And last year they used 55 pitchers.
Gotcha.
So
So yeah, I mean, either way, they're well over, on pace to outdo what they did last year, and it feels right. Like we said, there just hasn't been that. I mean, the guys they brought in to start theoretically are Brendan Hanafy and Ashton Godot, and but then they went and grabbed some guys from indie ball, right? The lefty
yeah,
whose name escapes me, and yeah, it's been a strange way to treat AAA this year. We keep assuming that raft of arms in Double A, which you pointed out on Twitter, they're like all among the top 10 and strikeouts, or top 8. You said,
yeah, the entire rotation.
yeah. You assume at some point those guys are going to get up to Toledo, but I don't know. Maybe they like keeping them all together. I'm not entirely sure what the holdup is.
And to put the context, by the way, 37 pitchers were used in Toledo in 2021. So they've already used more pitchers already this year than they did 2 years ago. So I'll just put that in the context. Stanford, thank you very much for that. And we'll get to a question. Appreciate that. Because he asked a question: what translates better from AAA to MLB? Batting average or on base percentage?
Exquisite.
Oh, nice. Um, my guess is on base percentage. I actually don't know that off the top of my head, because batting average, a lot of that is dependent on, when you put balls in play, how often they're converted into outs. And just by the nature of being in the big leagues, you're going to have the best defenders on the planet. So more ground balls are getting converted to outs, more fly balls are getting converted to outs. And on base percentage is more a product of your eye and your willingness to take a walk. Now, the pitchers are better with the command, so it all goes down. It all goes down significantly when you jump from AAA to the majors, but I would bet that on base percentage goes down less than batting average.
I think it also depends on the league too. For example, the Pacific Coast League batting average doesn't really matter because everyone hits really well there, based
Yeah, the
off the
ball
different.
flies
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. So yeah, there's like the elevation levels or anything like that. But I think it's I want to say the Southern League too, or the Texas League. I can't remember which one. Also, you gotta throw that out the window. So I think on base percentage plays a bigger role, but really depends on the league too. I mean, the international league itself, I would go with on base percentage versus batting average. I mean, but Like if you're having an absurd batting average in AAA, like Colt keeps doing, then maybe that's a different story. But I don't know. Like I look at again, you can't even. I think of all those teams with like the Dodgers when they put up some good numbers in Oklahoma City, for example. You have to get pause and go. Well, that's just that league. So
Yeah, and like there's some guys who just can hit really well in AAA and can't hit it all in the majors. It's there is a dividing point, and it feels unfortunate, almost like a trick to be that good at baseball, but just not quite good enough that you can do it in the major leagues. But there are probably guys who are career 300 hitters in AAA. Well, I talked about it before. Victor Reyes is a 320 hitter, a 319 hitter in AAA over his career. The big leagues,
yeah.
it's what 240.
All right, look at
Am
Tyler
I having
Nevin
luck?
too. Tyler Nevin fits the
Yeah.
same category. Oh, thank you,
Thank you
Sean.
very much.
Exquisite.
Empty vessel of a sports day.
Yeah, it is. It is. You know, I've been watching the old 30 for 30s. I don't want to get
Hmm.
too off topic, but I've been watching some of the old 30 for 30s that I missed. And I watched the Once Upon a Time, the one about the 86 Mets, the 4-part
Oh,
series.
nice. Yeah.
That's a really good one. It was,
Oh, that's a hell of a team to talk
yeah.
about.
Oh, man. We've done a podcast on the 86 Mets, and that was one of my favorite podcasts because it was nice to talk about something other than Tigers and talk about, not that I have any issue not talking about the Tigers, but from a context of looking at it from historically now, like how crazy Wally Beckman became and the
Yeah.
cast of characters, and of course Lane Dykstra, and you kind of understand him half the time because like he's hustled people out of money anyway. But
You know, it's wild. I'm just looking at so there are 15 pitchers in Toledo this year with at least 20 innings, and only two of them have an ERA under four. Alex Faedo at 3.8 and Matt Whistler at 3.03. Everybody else 4.7, 4.8, 4.9. Like it's only two of them have an ERA under 4.7. So yeah, it's been rough down there in Toledo. Ball's flying.
Metal Bug 99. I want to know if we're still going to do a show on the 93 Tigers. Yeah, there's actually we had a gentleman on not too long ago. His name is Roger Yoder, and he did a whole series of books on. He did a whole book on the Detroit Tigers history, and it's really well done. And I've been talking to him about possibly doing like a podcast and having him come on and talk about that and being kind of narrating. But I'll probably wait till after the off season because we have many more games to cover and want to give that as much attention as possible because I rather my goal is to do something like Secret Base did. I don't know if you saw the new Secret Base that came out with they did the Maglio Ordonez,
I didn't see that. No.
the World Series, the home run that
Nice.
or not the home run that got into the World Series. Secret Base to me is one of the best baseball channels out there. Period. They do such a great work. The Dave Steve one was one of my favorite pieces of video I've seen in a long time. So, but yeah, we did a question about the Flying Tigers. We'll get to that too as well, and of course, Blood Right.
Exquisite.
So when they ask us, if they ask us how we build this podcast network, we build it with literally blood, sweat, and tears. The blood
Hi.
of Blood Right.
Yeah. Cheers for
Oh,
fears.
that's a bad joke.
Sawabona, he said. Which
What is that?
I believe it's hello in Zulu, something like
Nice.
that. It's also something that people in Boston say when they're in showers with their buddies.
Oh, nice.
But Sawabona.
Oh, so you Bona.
Anyway,
Oh,
sorry.
there you go. All right. Well, so getting back to Toledo pitching for a moment. There is, I mean, as far as there is one other pitcher I do want to I wanted to highlight a little or quickly, and that is, and he's only again. This is something that was kind of concerning a little bit too. Was Austin Bergner, and the reason why I bring him up, Chris, is that his velocity's down even more, and it just seems like he, after having a really good year last year, it just seems like he's kind of taking a step back a little bit.
Yeah, it's he, in all intents and purposes, he's a junk baller now. He's throwing lots of breaking balls, lots of curves, and the fastballs, barely touching 90, 91, which is a bummer because he was throwing a lot harder than that a couple of years ago. Like, not a lot harder, but he was touching like 94. And last year it was like he'd flirt with 92. So I don't know what the deal is there, but yeah, for a minute there, he looked like a legit prospect last year. And then he got up to AAA and it all kind of unraveled and it hasn't come back yet, which is unfortunate. But again, that's what these different levels are for. Sometimes it feels odd, but sometimes there's enough of a demarcation that some guys just can't hack it at the next level.
So speaking of that, by the way, can't hack at this level. Steely Walker was released by the Tigers. So I think that we're gonna see. I think we're gonna see more of that too in the next couple of weeks as they continue to fill in for the draft and as draft signees sign.
Yeah, it's pretty typical for this time of year. The halfway point, there are guys that were there to kind of fill a hole in the roster. And unfortunately for Walker, he just was never healthy. He must have gotten 30 at bats tops this year, I think. Maybe he had a couple of weeks, I think, down in West Michigan. But yeah, I think they were basically ready to move on from him. So yeah, we'll see some more guys get released here in the next couple of weeks, probably. It's unfortunate, but it's just part of the business where there's only so much room, and they'll put you on the development list. But if they don't think you're worth developing, then that'll be it for you.
Another injury update or another update to pass along to Andre Lipsius, and this is you caught this that he will start the second half of the season on the IL.
Yeah, and I couldn't quite figure out what happened. I went back and looked. It was I think the 7th or the 8th. He got one plate appearance. He walked, and then the next inning he caught a pop up at second base, looked normal, and then the next inning they replaced him. So I don't know if he tweaked something early in the game. That sounds like maybe a back or something, right? Like something stiffened up on him and he just didn't feel right. So they put him on the IL. We'll see what happens. It wasn't, you know, we didn't get confirmation about what happened with Peyton Graham's latest injury, but you could kind of put the pieces together when you see that it happened right after he grounded into a double play, which made me think, okay, he was probably lunging for the bag and either turned his ankle or, pulled a hamstring or something like that. With Lipsius, I have no idea.
Yeah.
We need to cultivate our sources in Toledo better.
Yeah. By the way, I think for the record, I think our West Michigan sources are fine. Lakeland is a ghost town of sources, but I have a couple people down there in West Michigan too, but Toledo is, like I said, it's like virtually impossible sometimes to get hold of somebody there. So,
which you wouldn't think. I don't know. You'd think it would be easy, but
yeah,
for whatever reason, we just don't have a great relationship with the Mud Hens.
It's not that we don't. It's not that we don't have a great relationship. We don't have a relationship.
Yeah, we don't. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's not like they don't like us or they just we just don't have a person there we can go to.
Right.
But
so
out there watching.
There was one more question about Toledo because then I want to get that Lakeland question because that's a good question because Lakeland is intriguing in a sense because some of the pitching they've been getting lately has been really. It's a nice change of pace because last year that staff last year was terrible. It was not a good staff last year. I'm not trying to sound harsh, but it was the reality was they didn't really have a lot of arms. With Trey Melton moving on, we thought that maybe they would fall back a little bit, but instead they've rallied back pretty well, and we'll get to them. When we address the Lakeland, we'll get to them. But the question that Stan had was in our chat was, Gary Huzz at such a fall from grace at Toledo. Do you think that's him or coaching at Toledo? I think it's a little mixture of him because, again, this is where he had his – remember how he was throwing better last year when he was coming to his handset and he wasn't doing the big – he was trying to – and it was working on his windup. That's when it was most effective. I think he's been very inconsistent when it comes to his mechanics. I could be wrong about that, but I see like it's not been consistent.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's weird because he was a guy that was mostly known for his command and control, and then he started throwing much, much harder. Like legitimately like 4 or 5 miles an hour harder than he was before.
Right.
And the command and control went away. And that's ever since that happened. And he's been working kind of that long relief role. He's not throwing nearly enough strikes. And that's killing him. I think his walk rate has been like above 6 per 9 basically ever since. I'm looking right now. Yeah, he's striking out 12 per 9, but walking almost 6.5 per 9. And that's how you end up with an ERA close to 5. There's stuff there, but it's just if you can't command it, then it doesn't really help you that much.
I like this comment here by Stop It. I wonder and hope teams will value pitchers who can be junk ballers. I hope everyone can see by now, putting everyone on the list of fireballers. And then Chris, I wonder if junk ballers could be more effective if they start throwing the knuckleball again.
It's probably, I mean, I didn't mean to say that as like a derogatory term for Bergner. He had a game earlier this year where he struck out like 9 in 3 innings or something like that. It was. We put it up on our video because it's just harder for those guys to, sometimes it's just hard to have feel for your curveball and your slider and your changeup to the point where you could put it everywhere you want it. And when you hang those, they get crushed. It's generally speaking, it's much easier to command the fastball. I think for pitchers, Alex Lang notwithstanding.
Yeah, and the thing is that I mean, I think about guys like Charlie Huff, the former knuckleballer pitcher. I think about Jamie Moyer, who I mean, that guy made. I think he pitched till he was like 45, 46, and when
Yeah,
junk ball.
he was a soft tossing lefty, yeah, but it
Yeah.
wasn't he wasn't. Um, yeah, I mean, you picture the guy from Major League. That's the junk ball
Yeah,
you're
put
picturing,
some
right? It's just
Crisco on
yeah.
it. Put some Crisco on it.
We
Little
saw
jalapeno for my nose.
we saw a knuckleballer in Erie for Altoona. Big
Oh
dude
yeah,
with
that
a
guy with the
beard,
big
right? Yeah,
beard.
yeah,
Yeah, that
that
guy
was
was
kind of fun.
huge. Yeah,
But they're still out there. But yeah, it's hard to find good knuckleballers because that's another tough pitch to really consistently control. R.A. Dickey was kind of the last one. I don't know. There was a guy that came up for the Padres, I thought.
I think so too. But I also think because the advancement of video and some of the more advanced metrics, you can almost look at like especially some of those ones where it looks like 3D mapping or where they have the stick figure kind of 3D, and you can see like how they're throwing it. At some point, there should be a player, Matt
Thanks, Sean.
Waldron. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sean. There's gonna be a certain point where players are gonna start picking up where to um, kind of exactly where to hit it. So who knows? I mean, it would be cool to see something like that. Like, but I disagree with John Smoltz, who I think he was saying talk about that players or pitchers need to pitch to contact. Not to a certain extent, I could see that, but the way hitters are going right now with the power numbers and everything, they're not, and the strikeout rate steadily increasing every year. I think pitching to contact wouldn't work anyways because if they do make contact, it's going to go somewhere out of the park, and or they're not going to miss a lot. I don't know. Like the idea of missing bats with sliders and like just ridiculous movement. I think that's more where baseball's going, at least in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for the so-called art of pitching, right? To keep guys off balance so they're not getting good wood on the bat or on the ball. Fastballs in, changeups away, things like that. Classic. But if they put the ball in play, something bad could happen. Even still, right? Your best weapon as a pitcher is the strikeout because nothing bad is going to happen unless you throw a wild pitch too. So I don't blame pitchers for leaning into the strikeouts at all. Uh, Now, if you want to keep your pitch count down and throw more complete games, then sure, throw sinkers. And the only problem is that a lot of swings now are tailored to crush sinkers. That's the whole reason in the four seam at the top of the zone revolution of the last decade or whatever. Like sinkers were in vogue up until then. That was the big thing that the Pirates were doing, and hitters started crushing them, and they're still pretty much crushing sinkers.
Yeah, the sinker doesn't have that heavy. I mean, outside Jason Foley was just like a bowling ball, but even then, he can put a fat. Here's the thing about Jason Foley too. Remember we watched him in the minors. Everything was he threw really fast, but everything was straight. And all of a sudden, out of
Mhm.
nowhere, that that sinker started developing, and then his fastball started getting some movement. So it was a good
Yeah.
revelation to see there.
Well, and that's been the big thing of the last 3 or 4 years, I would say, is that they're not. So everybody was trying to throw sinkers, then everybody was trying to throw the four seamers up at the top of the zone, and now they're saying, okay, there are certain guys who just have strengths. Somebody has a strength that your strength is throwing a sinker, and you throw a really good one, so do that rather than you try to pigeonhole him and making him a four seam guy. But some guys just kind of stuck in that dead zone where it's not, it doesn't have the great spin and carry that you need for a four seamer, and it doesn't really move much as a sinker. So you kind of, and that's I think where like Reese Olson is, where he's got the velo and he's throwing two seamers, he's throwing four seamers, and he just has to command them because he can't throw them in the zone. Either one gets it hit hard. So it's sometimes some degree it's just kind of the card you're dealt. But their pitching labs are doing a lot better job of helping guys maximize what their natural abilities already are.
Yeah, and there's also, what I think the split figure is coming back into fashion too, which is a pitch that I remember in the '90s it was really widely popular. David Cohn threw a really good splitter. I can
Clemens,
think
right?
of, yeah, Jack McDowell had a good splitter, and then because all the arm issues, it went out of style. But it's coming back with a vengeance. But that was one of those pitches that I remember when Bruce Sutter, towards the end, like he was the one that quote unquote invented it or put it in the vogue, whatever the case is in terms of relievers. But when you start seeing starters throw it, it was just a thing of beauty. Like that pitch, a split finger was devastating pitch. Just it would just the way it would bottom out of that zone. Fascinating pitch.
Yeah, I mean, we were hoping that Mize would be that guy, but
It's crazy.
hasn't been healthy enough to do it. So,
Yeah. So
so
let's move on to Erie, shall we?
Toledo. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to Erie because I think there's a lot of good stories in Erie just outside of Colt Keith. Like Colt Keith is in Toledo now, but there's Justice Bigby, which we're gonna. By the way, we're working on our top 25, or we're gonna redo the top 25. So we're gonna probably have that up by the next week or two. We're just as a committee we're meeting right now. I have an idea what I want to do for my top 25. I'm sure Chris does, but we got to talk to our data.
I've already ranked mine out to like 45.
Yeah, I actually ranked mine out to 30. So,
Well,
but I have.
thought we can do a top 30 if we want to go.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Let's ask the audience. Okay, everybody in the audience, would you rather see a top 25 or top 30? I am. You know what? I have the idea of putting a poll in here. I could do that. I don't know why I've not done that yet, but
yeah, it would be easier than getting
Yeah,
yes,
get them easier. That way, I can get the. But I had to mute. I had to take out the. Somebody we get copyrighted because I put somebody who recorded an ESPN clip for the Alabama when I was playing the clip the other day for the shortstop the Tigers picked.
Jim Jarvis.
Jim Jarvis, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So,
I'll be damned.
Yeah, so I lost some of the answers for the request for people.
All
right. So it looks like top 30. Let's see here. We'll do official one as you did that. But anyway, again, the reason why I did top 25 originally is because let's be honest here, Chris. We at the time we didn't think that there was 30 players that were good enough. At one point, and it's changed. It's a good thing though. So
yeah, it was tough once you get past about 15. It was tough to figure out any kind of order and yeah. I think the last one we had everybody rank their top 30, and then we came up with the top 25 from that. So if we were to do a top 30, we'd do like a top 35, and then bring the top 30 out of that. But and it's just interesting, because you kind of want to add a bunch of these guys they just drafted, even though we haven't seen any of them, just because you like the upside. So I think I put 6 of them in my top 30, but we'll see. That feels like a slightly high number for a new draft. But again, like you said, that the system isn't terribly strong, but most of the talent in the system, at least the plurality, I suppose, is in AA. That's just been where a lot of the talent was all year. And,
so Stan was wondering when the next MLB Top 100 prospects list will include the 2023 draft picks. Usually, probably by the end of the month. I'm assuming.
I think they usually do it early August. They'll do they wait because that's when I think the deadline for draft picks to sign is the first couple days of August. I don't know the exact date, but it's typically August 2nd or 3rd, I think.
So right now, we have, I put the voting in there. So right now, we have 10 votes in so far. 70% is for 30. 20. So the other 30% is for 25.
Well, if we do a 30 and you guys only want 25, just stop reading. Stop reading at 25. Pretend those are the 526. It's all good.
We'll call it the people's. You know what? We'll call it the people's 30. That's what we'll call it because it was like the people voted for 30. You wanted 30. They aren't. Damn it, we gave you 30. There we go. And I meant damn it in a good way, not a bad way. All right. So Erie. Let's get to Erie here. And there's a lot of standouts in Erie, like in terms of even surprises a little bit. We talked about Justice Bigby, who is one of the top hitters in the system currently right now, too, among all the regulars with a qualified at bats.
Hitters in all of minor league baseball.
Yeah. So if we're going to put this together in all affiliated baseball, where does Justice Bigby rank among all the teams? And I'm just going to put all the org here for a moment while I pull that up. He's 8th. He is 8th in all of minor league. I'm sorry, he's 8th in all AA. Let me just put this in. He's 8th in all AA. Go ahead.
Filter out rookie ball. I would filter out rookie ball, so you have to do like 100 plate appearances or something like that.
Because put 100 plate appearances. Yeah.
190 WRC plus or something like that for the whole season.
And that's it. But all affiliated minor league or just. Oh, all right. Anyway.
Yeah.
Show me. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, the big story, of course, for the first, you know, 90% of the first half of the year was Colt Keith tearing it up, and as you mentioned, had that he got off to a relatively slow start for the first couple of weeks. So that's when we saw him. He was kind of hitting the ball, popping things up a bit too much, not quite on time, and then I don't know exactly, or he talked about it. It was he was crouching down too much, I think he said.
Yeah.
And so he started standing up a little bit more, and then that's when things took off. He had that monster 6 for 6 cycle, and never really cooled off. Got up to Toledo, hit that home run in his first plate appearance, hit a 470-foot home run a couple days later. But yeah, I mean, he was the driving force for Erie for most of the year, really the catalyst for that offense. And not necessarily a catalyst, but like he was always batting second behind Trey Cruz, who was kind of the catalyst for a long time.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I think goes about Erie too is that we were talking about Trey Cruz was a good story earlier in the year. Then when he struggled as of late, his dad came into town, and I think maybe his dad got in his head. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, the numbers there are kind of staggering.
yeah,
I don't know exactly when his dad came into town or when he had that visit and whenever his swing, and it could just be, coincidence, right? But he had like a 135 WRC plus through June 1st, and since then it's like 75. So
yeah.
the first 8, 10 weeks of the season, he was crushing it. In the last 6 or 7, he's been well below average.
But as far as qualified bats go, I mean, another guy who's kind of stood out too. He's got 10 home runs. I mean, he's 25, but it's Andrew Navigato too, who's had a pretty decent season.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of learned last year that he was a really quality minor league player. Like he was a key part of Erie's playoff run last year, and I think he did get a brief trip to Toledo last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, towards the end of the year, I believe.
But I think that they just view him kind of as an org soldier, and as soon as he got healthy and got back to Erie this year, it was right around the same time as Dylan Dingler. The Seawolf season turned around. I think he's a great fit for that team, a great leader or whatever. And I don't know. Yeah, he and Dane Myers were kind of the question mark or guys last year, where they
Yeah.
both were producing a ton. It's like, are these guys? Is there something more here or not? And it was hard to tell. And I don't think that they think there's a big leaguer there with Navigato, but he's certainly been a huge part of Erie's success.
Crayola wanted to know if it was any relation for Cruz who started playing in the outfield. No, because he was
He,
actually hitting really well
yeah,
in the outfield too.
he
So it
started
was,
playing the outfield at the beginning of the year.
yeah,
I think he started the first game in center field, didn't he?
yes, he did.
So
I, I think I think there's something mentally. It's a mental thing with him because his approach to the plate has changed, or it still looks the same. But it was something that I was talking to somebody about how his dad came into town and was trying to tell him you need to hit with more power, and so who knows? Again, I think that's where I'm going to go with that because I mean this is a guy who's the head coach at Rice University and was a major leaguer. So
yeah, it's. I think it's got to be tough when there are a number of Tigers minor leaguers who have fathers who are also played at one level or another and probably taught them their swing and said, "Oh,
Gage
this is why you're
Workman,
struggling. You're getting away from what I taught you." And
yeah,
and meanwhile, the organization is like, "Well, we're trying to get him away from what you taught him, and you keep bringing him back." So I think that's probably pretty common. But what's weird about that is, some dads, like Riley Green's dad was a hitting instructor, right? Good.
right.
Just yeah, if Riley's struggling, go ahead, go back to your dad because your swing is awesome. So whatever you're doing, do it. And so I don't know, it's tough there.
We're also seeing a couple things in Double A that are in Erie that are a little different than we see in normal years. So, for example, Daniel Cabrera is back in Lakeland, and he started the season in Erie. But I think I don't try to speculate this, but I feel like he's on his last legs with the organization, just because kind of he was down in development, and then they put him back in Lakeland, and he's hasn't been back since. And then we've seen this too with the likes of the I'm trying to think of there's another player that was it? Oh, Eric De La Rosa,
Hmm.
who just got released. So Gage Workman's playing time has been very sporadic, not consistent, and that also has something to do with his bat too as well. So there's, like I said, those were some like if you've been watching the Seawolves for a couple of years like we have, it's just been a little bit different to see if people wondering why Workman's on an everyday lineup. If you're not producing, you're not going to get in. As simple as that.
Yeah, and it's been I don't know, it's been slightly disappointing for a couple other players. Josh Crouch started the year in Erie and just could not hit Double-A pitching. Looked exactly like he did at the end of last year, and so that's why he's back in High A. It's been pretty early for Danny Soretti to tell anything. Winslow Perez has been okay, and he's doing a little bit of everything that he was doing last year. The power is just completely evaporated, and the power was kind of new last year, which makes you wonder if maybe that was just a mirage. But I keep going back to the issue with his back. Like he had
Yeah.
back trouble, and I don't know if he's able to swing with the full force that he used to be, which is either way that's kind of a concern, right? Because I'm looking right now, his ISO in Double-A last year was 233 over 39 games. So that's slugging percentage minus batting average. So over 200, that's legit. He had 5 home runs, tons of extra base hits. This year it's .084 over 67 games. He's got 4 home runs in 67 games this year. So the power just hasn't been there, and that's a concern because you need to have a little bit of pop because he's got some other interesting skills, but none of them are like strong enough to really support him not hitting for at least extra base power more often.
I think there's something to the back thing because when I talked to him in spring training, and he was getting worked on every single day and doing these therapy, and he didn't get started spring training wise until a few weeks after the season started. And I still think that, like, again, I will every time I think of backs, I think of Larry Bird in the Sports Century where he went out and shot that his back of that machine he was on all the time with a shotgun. Because when you start messing with somebody's back, your back, you're done. You're done. It's not, you're not ever the same because you do so much with your back. And I still think there's a lingering issue with it. And I think even talking to a few folks about it too, that he does experience some pain from it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you lose a whole season and most of the offseason with back trouble without it being some kind of consistent issue. So you just hopefully that gets cleared up for him at some point, and he can start hitting with a little bit more pop because, yeah, I mean, he's a solid player, but you don't hit for power, you might not be on the 40-man roster for too much longer.
Although every time I think of the word back, I think of the Righteous Gemstones and Baby Billy. Ah, my back.
Oh, my back. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we didn't talk. I mean, that's basically. I mean, Dingler is
Yeah.
there. He's been kind of what he's always been. He's hitting for a little bit more power than usual, but the average really isn't there. Strikeouts are high. It's I mean, I did the comparison on the Discord. Dingler's been at Double-A for about twice as long as Jake Rogers and hit for less power, striking out more, and walking less. So if you want to have a good idea of what kind of big leaguer Dylan Dingler might be, it might be a poor man's Jake Rogers, which is not what anybody wanted. It doesn't necessarily mean he's consigned to that fate. Um, catchers take a long time to develop, but it's been a couple of years of stagnation from Dingler, unfortunately.
Yeah. And there's a lot of times too where you wonder why the Tigers brought in so many catchers. There is a reason why. Again, you just don't do that for no reason. Although I'm surprised they drafted what, 2 catcher or 1 catcher?
They took the kid from Wake Forest in the top 10, 6th round,
Yeah.
and then they took the JUCO kid in the 15th round. So I think just 2. I'm sure that they'll bring in 2 more at least as unsigned free agents or undrafted free agents.
Yeah. Definitely. Because there's even as Sam was talking about this earlier about the possibility of Eric Haas being traded or what have you. I think if they're gonna do a trade, if they're gonna trade Baez or gonna trade Rodriguez or whomever, I think a catcher is gonna be something they're gonna ask for back in return. So let's get to the pitching because the pitching has been at first season first started. Sewell's staff was struggling, and it was a new pitching coach. It was a little bit of adjustment for him and trying to come out there when things got bad. When Gabe Alvarez did a really good job of having this pitching coach who was really at Lakeland, Chris, I think it was, or Complex League.
I think so, yeah. Pimentel.
Yeah. And so it was taking him a little bit to get going, but then all of a sudden you're starting to see the fruits of the labor a little bit. The one of the best stories I think about first half of the season is that Sawyer Gibson Long takes a start off, learns a cutter, and then becomes a better pitcher, and he's among the top 8 in strikeouts on the team. And so K per 9, by the way, if you're in case you're curious, who leads in that department across the system? Number 1 is uh Kinder
Kind of
Montero.
Montero.
Number 2 is Brent Erler. So one of the arms though that's kind of disappointing. I don't want to say disappointing, but we haven't seen or heard from in a while is Dylan Smith, who's completely disappeared off the face of the planet.
Well, he had a forearm injury. I think it was a forearm
Yeah.
strain, which is usually a precursor to Tommy John surgery. But yeah, I had him among my list of disappointments this year, and it's kind of unfair to say that about a guy who was injured. But he did start the year, and he wasn't great in any of his early outings. That doesn't mean he would have continued to struggle in Double A, but he wasn't looking good, and then he went down with an injury. Maybe the injury was there the whole time. That could explain it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a guy I was kind of counting on to take a step forward this year, and that just happens with pitchers, right? Sometimes they just go down and or their stuff goes away. So hopefully, we haven't had an update on the minor league injuries in a while. Maybe we'll get one in the
Probably
next couple weeks.
maybe or even tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow possibly,
Oh,
because with
yes.
everything starting back up again.
Yeah, I could see that. So I don't know. I mean, we'll find out if like he's going to be on a rehab soon or if he's going to go down for surgery. But yeah, that one's vaguely disappointing. But they've had enough arms down there. You talk about Sawyer Gibson Long has been pretty consistent all year long. Herder has kind of struggled his last month or so, but still his overall numbers are strong. And that's kind of the interesting aspect of this Erie rotation to me is that a lot of them have been just okay. Like they've been plugging along, not getting horribly destroyed, but not also dominating for the most part. And like Wilmer Flores is the poster child for that. He had a couple rough outings at the beginning of the year, but then I think he's probably put in a dozen consecutive solid starts. And his ERA is pretty strong now. It's just, but he hasn't really shown that electric stuff we saw last year.
Yeah, speaking of electric stuff too, same thing with Ty Madden. First start of the year was dominating. He went out there and was on par
Yeah.
with Gavin Williams, and all of a sudden after that, it's been. I mean, over his last 4 starts, he's got an ERA of 3.92, but he's also walking in 20 innings, work nine batters, 20 strikeouts. So it's you don't know what version of him you're gonna get.
Well, yeah, and beyond that, we haven't seen that version of him since really. That guy who was so dominant that Pat Caputo said that there was no reason for the Tigers to hold him down. The, it was just a funny tweet to me because he was like, "Yeah, okay, Pat."
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm gonna backtrack that
But
and never say that happened because I'm Pat Caputo and I do that.
yeah, and there are times when I've watched Madden starts and I'm like, he's throwing like 6 different pitches, and I don't think he needs that many pitches. I'm sure maybe it helps, but I feel like just focus on a couple and throw. I don't know, but it's weird because he'll touch it. I don't know how much I believe it. I think it was in Hartford. He was hitting 100 a couple times. It's like this is a big arm. He certainly is capable of hitting 98, but it's just not consistently there, and I don't know what the problem is. I always go back to I just don't think he's a terribly good athlete in the sense of being able to repeat his motion and his release point. The sort of athlete that we talk about when we were talking about like a golfer or one of your buddy who can just pick up golfing and shoot like an 80 because he just knows how his body works. I don't think Ty Madden's that kind of athlete, so I think he just loses his release point and his pitches kind of flatten out on him a lot. And I don't know what you can do about that. I wonder. I think I made the comparison to Kyle Funkhauser. Like maybe Madden just needs to become that 1-2 inning bullpen guy and focus on 2-3 pitches tops.
Yeah, maybe air it out a little bit. That might suit him long term. At this point, I don't know. Again, it just really depends on what they're going to do. So let's move on to West Michigan too, because I do want to mention, or I do want to throw out some of those the most improved players that you and I want to discuss, and some of our listeners who gave us their suggestions. So West Michigan, also in terms of bat wise, and the bats really have been kind of a story here in the sense that Chris Myers broke out. He's now in Erie. Big B, we talked about. Danny Soretti's now in Erie. So some of the bats have been promoted. But then you see, of course, Roberto Campos we'll get to shortly. I like the trade for Brady Allen they brought over, and he's been providing defensive stability out there for the Whitecaps. But then ML Jerry was another one too, is another example. But then after that, it's kind of a there's some disappointment here with Isaac Pacheco and it's just some other kind of regression a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at this point, you mentioned some of the Chris Myers and Big B. They hit their way out of there. So did Ben Malgeri. Brady Allen has been a consistent kind of producer, and Jace Young has been relatively consistent. I say relatively because it seems like every time it seems like he'll have a game or two where it's like, okay, he's finally figured it out. He's like, 3 for 4 with a home run and two doubles and a walk. It's like, okay, he's got it. And then he'll go 2 games without a hit, or it'll be one hit and one walk over 2 games. He's just not consistent, and he's still only hitting 248 on the year. The WRC plus is fine. It's 138, 140 or something like that. And he may move up. I don't know if they have a spot for him in Erie, um, but beyond that, yeah, it's Pacheco has been a huge disappointment this year. I don't want to come down too hard on him because he's still only 20 and
Right.
he's in high A. That sometimes that's a tough level for guys, but it's disappointing for me because I was really high on him coming into the year and even at the beginning of the year after seeing him in Toledo or Lansing last year and in Lansing again at the beginning of this season. It was like this kid's a mover. I think we even alluded to the fact that if he does what we think he can do, he could be in Double A and be a top 100 prospect. And he can't hit. He's not hitting right now. He's striking out way too much. His bat looks slow. He's late on velocity. He's early on breaking balls. It's just kind of a mess right now. And I don't know if he needs a complete rework of his swing. If the pitchers have just found all his weaknesses, and there are many of them. I don't know, but yeah, he's certainly among the most disappointing players in the system this year for me. Um, and we talked about like Roberto Campos. We've talked glowingly about him a lot this year as a guy who was far more advanced than I expected. Really good bat to ball skills, quality eye, like he's not chasing a ton. But pitchers there have figured out how to get him to make contact without doing damage, and he's obliging. I don't know exactly, but I think it's been 6 weeks or so since he's had a home run.
It
So
sounds about right. Yeah.
he had like a 15-game hitting streak, right? He's hitting 256 this year, which again, he just turned 20. It's totally fine. Like you don't want to get too worried about this. But what you hope to see from him was consistent power, and it just hasn't been there. And then he's been really raw on every other aspect of the game, on defense, base running, making good decisions. It's not there for him. So I'm looking, yeah, no home runs since at least June 1st. I think his last home run might have been the uh, the one at Dow Diamond against Great Lakes that he crushed down the line, which was, yeah, who knows how long ago it was, but
That was like I think late April, early May, maybe.
yeah, I'm looking now. Let's see. Maybe he hit an opposite field home run or something like that in Great Lakes, but let's see. Home run. Oh, here it is. Yep, that one. May 16th was his last home run. So you're
Wow.
talking, yeah. Let me look. I'll do it. Do it this. I can. Sorry, the people are listening to this. No, I don't want to do 21. Anyway, he's not hitting for enough power. That's the thing, and I think that hitters know that they can throw him, where they can pitch to him to get him to get himself out. And that's what concerns me about that is that was the issue that plagued Tigers hitters all throughout the Alavila era, right? That's Victor Reyes' problem. That was Dawa Lugo's problem. It was Willie Castro's problem. Is these guys who can make contact, but it's not necessarily going to be good contact, and you're just doing the defense favors by not being a little bit more selective. You hope that Campos can figure that out. So, yeah, we're 41 games. That was 42 games ago he had his last home run.
Yeah.
10
For that
doubles
kind
and a
of
triple since then.
Well, that kind of build too, you expect a little bit of power. The
He's
power at
he's in,
least coming on a little bit more.
he's incredibly strong. He just it's yeah, it's a .075 ISO and 79 WRC plus since then. So, you know, again, he and Pacheco are guys that could very easily repeat West Michigan next year without much concern. We saw Parker Meadows stagnate a little bit and then eventually figure things out. So I'm not shoveling dirt on their grave or anything like that, but it's they're two sides of the same sort of disappointment this year. As you really hope those guys would take a big step forward, and it just hasn't happened totally.
So onto the pitching staff, and while I'll bring this up, then I'm going to actually run and get some water real quick. Carlos Pena is on the top 8 of most strikeouts, 74 and 71 innings pitched. He's been kind of sporadic lately as in terms of consistency. Wilkie Hernandez at 24, you would expect to have some better numbers, but again, he's coming off arm surgery, so maybe we'll give him cut him a little slack. But beyond that, Chris, the Erie, or excuse me, a lot of the best pitchers are now in Erie. So
Yep.
Troy Melton has just been Troy Melton already among top 8 in strikeouts too.
Yeah, Melton's kind of the one bright spot there still. Pena is actually on the development list now. They sent him on. I don't know if that was just because it's the All-Star break or what, but or if they have something for him to work on. But I think Garrett Burnham has been fine for the most part. I'm looking at his stats right now. So he's got a 3.79 ERA, but he's not a strikeout guy. He's John Smolt's favorite. 6.13 strikeouts per 9. Kind of a ground ball guy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the pitchers that Rogelio was talking about have moved on. Blake Holub was awesome out of the bullpen. He moved up to Erie. He's been good up there, although he's given up a couple home runs. It was similar with Tyler Madison. Tyler Madison's kind of one of my breakouts this year as a reliever. He's not throwing a ton of strikes. Or he has thrown a ton of strikes. He's just not, carving up batters in the zone. But lots of strikeouts there. But beyond that, Laughlin had 37 innings for West Michigan, but he's gone up in Toledo, and it really is. It's a little bit of. It's something I tweeted out. The Tigers really needed to take a lot of young players in the draft this year because they don't have a whole lot of talent at West Michigan and below, and it's kind of stark when you look at these rosters. I think there's a handful of prospects between the two teams, and they've been giving Williander Moreno a ton of starts, and he used to be a nothing but a reliever. And I don't really know who they're going to bring up from Lakeland if they do bring anybody up to start in the future. But yeah, and Melton has been good enough to possibly warrant a move up to AA if and when they move those guys up to Toledo. I think he's a guy that I think is probably in the right spot for now in terms of being there with Dan Rickleball, the pitching coach, and developing his pitches, because the fastball is fine. He just needs to find some more consistent secondaries.
There is Lakeland. So, if we're gonna move to Lakeland,
I think I don't think there's anything. I mean, I don't know if we talk about. Yeah, I don't know. Josh Crouch is just kind of holding his own in West Michigan. He's been a little bit of a disappointment this year in terms of, last year he was really hitting well, and this year it's just kind of. I think I talked to you earlier. I thought he lost too much weight. He's too skinny now. I think he needs to be a husky catcher. I think that helps him rather than being. But maybe he got in shape because he wanted to increase his mobility behind the plate. Who knows?
So, by the way, I mean, maybe Connor Holden. He's at West Michigan yet?
I think he was at West Michigan. I think he's been pitching there. I think. Then that's one of the interesting things is some of the like non-drafted free agent guys that they've taken in the last couple of years have filtered their way up. Cam Brown has filtered his way up to West Michigan. It's just really, a product of the lack of high upside talent in Lakeland and West Michigan. So they, Crayola said they didn't take many pitchers in the draft. Or they have many international pitchers and instructs ready to move up. I mean, there are some names we know of, but I don't think so. I think, I think that Scott Harris probably believes that it's not hard to find bodies in the minor leagues based on the Brady Allen trade. Like, hey, we probably could use an outfielder. Let's go trade Jonathan Davis for, minor league outfielder because we need depth. It wouldn't shock me if you see a bunch of trades like that for pitchers. So, but they did. I mean, they took a handful of interesting arms in the draft. We'll see what they do with those guys.
So yeah, because Carlos Mercado is 19, which that's a somewhat of a big deal in a sense because Tigers really have not developed any type of international starting pitchers. Ontario's getting close to being that, but other than that, in terms of looking at Lakeland's overall roster in terms of pitching, man, it is, man. I mean, Chris Williams Jr.'s back in there, but how are they on a 10-game winning streak? I'll tell you, I have no idea. Maybe it's that time
Maybe,
of year where maybe a lot of those old A players in the other teams, their best players have moved on.
yeah, I did not even know that had won 10 games in a row, which is kind of wild. I'm supposed to pay attention to that sort of thing, but it's just not to be too blunt about it, but it's just such a boring roster that it's hard to like look at that and go, oh, cool. These guys are really tearing it up. It's just a collection of older kind of org guys and international pitchers who can't throw strikes. it's it's funny to look at these stats. Like, so if you just sort by FIP, Connor Holden is number 1 on the team at 218. Marco Jimenez is number 2 with a 3.50 despite having a 7.63 ERA. So I don't think the defense down there is doing him any favors. Um, and it's just, Troy Melton was right there. Joe Miller is a guy who was drafted last year, one of the 2 Miller lefties. There's Joe Miller and Jake Miller. Jake Miller has been really bad. Joe Miller has been fine. But yeah, it's just hard to, without seeing these guys every week, it's hard to know who actually has interesting stuff. But yeah, it's not a terribly talented roster, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I wish we had more to say other than like what we're seeing. But so somebody asked, by the way, who is on my hat? It's the Eugene Emerald hat, and that's I believe
Eugene.
the A affiliate of the Giants. Eugene, is it Eugene? Or am I?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
was just doing the what is the Ace Frehley song or whatever.
Oh,
Eugene.
oh yeah, that's right. I think that's our most highly charted song too. I believe it as well. But so I sent the link in there if anybody's interested in getting one of their hats. But I got it on clearance. Somehow I got this hat on clearance for like $10.
Nice.
So there's nice Christopher here. That's like
John
it's good.
Kruk.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, people used to talk about that with Prince Fielder, right?
Yeah.
And not to be too blunt about it, but he learned how to hit as a fat person, and he always hit as a fat person. So why lose weight? You know your body as a big guy. Like, don't mess things up. I understand. Like Dan Vogelbach, I don't think he's going to go out there and lose 100 pounds. I think he kind of gets some of that power from his heft, if you will. So I don't know. And it's not like Josh Crouch was fat or anything like that. He just looks kind of skinny to me now, and it's like I don't think that's terribly useful for a catcher. I think catchers need to be kind of burly because it's such a hard job, and you're probably sweating off, 5 pounds of water weight every game.
I
If
can't
that sort of thing
imagine.
is possible. I'm not a scientist.
Not, imagine Matt Stairs.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Stairs would always forever look like the swole, or whatever the proper term is.
Well, like I think CC Sabathia did lose some weight later in his career, didn't he? And it kind of helped extend his career. Or maybe he
Yeah.
just lost it after he stopped playing. I don't know. But I just think certain people are better as a little sturdier. The hitters in Lakeland, unfortunately, aren't a whole lot more exciting. There have been a couple. Luke Gold has picked things up as of late. He's up to 279 with a 174 ISO, which is pretty solid. And he got off to a really rough start, so he's finally figuring things out. Wouldn't shock me if he gets bumped up to. He would kind of be. He's a second baseman. He would kind of be the ideal guy to move up if Jace Young goes up, and or Kevin McGonigal ends up playing second base for Lakeland later this summer. And then Andrew Jenkins is the guy he's hit pretty well. Their first baseman, he was hurt for a while, but he's another guy who's not hitting for nearly as much power as you would think. I mean, that was kind of his thing. He's a first baseman. You need to hit for some power, and his ISO is under 100. It's hard to hit for power in Lakeland, but he hasn't done it. They did call up Don Johnson. We didn't mention him in the West Michigan, but I've always found him kind of intriguing. He's just a super fast guy with a little bit of pop, but he strikes out too much, and it's been a real rough intro for him in West Michigan. I think he's got a 40% strikeout rate or something like that. So, and Peyton Graham, we talked about Peyton Graham's injured. He's a guy that he had a pretty huge game a couple weeks ago. Thought like he was figuring some things out, and he's just kind of hanging out. 97 WRC plus, hitting 232, walk rate close to 12%, ISO 123. Just not doing a whole lot. That's terribly impressive, and I just don't. He's the opposite. I think he needs to add weight. I don't think he can. He's just so skinny that I don't think he can do much. He's when he catches a ball, he hits it hard and far, but I don't know. I think you need to add some strength to that bat speed to produce more.
I think he kind of has a classic throwback to him. You know what I mean? Just in terms of like one of those classic players that you would see skinny playing second base maybe in the 80s, but
Yeah, he just it's I don't know, and I don't know if you can add power to him. And then I think we have to talk about Christian Santana, right?
right.
He was a top 10 prospect for us, I think, heading into the season. I think we dropped him down to like 15 at our last update. And he's still not hitting. He's hitting 130. He's gotten better. I'm going to look to see what his stats are. He's still only 19, but I still think it's just probably way too passive of an approach, and the swing itself is too kind of launch angle-y, if you will, for him to hit consistently. So it's been a bummer. He's what is his number? He's hitting 132 right now, right?
Yeah.
135. I'm sorry, with 4 home runs this year, 20% walk rate, 21% walk rate, which is insane, and that's great, right? But it comes with a 29% strikeout rate and batting 135, and that's just not tenable. You maybe take those walks down 5% for another 50 points of average, if possible. That would be cool.
So yeah, Sean, August 1st is when the final signing date for the 2023 draft choices. So yeah, Christian, I don't want to give up on Santana, but if I don't when we redo our top 30 here, I don't. He might not even be in the top 30 at this point, man. Honestly, it's that fall from grace, not necessarily grace,
Yeah,
but
I
I
mean,
mean,
I had him pretty low on mine. Let's see.
yeah.
So like, I keep trying to find smaller samples to find better numbers from him. So I just going back to June, it's 183 for the last 5 weeks. If you go to June 14th, he's saying 200 over the last 5 weeks. So it's really just not. And again, batting average is not the most important thing in the world, but you have to hit in the minors. If you don't hit the minors, you're not going to hit in the majors. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. All right, so we asked our listeners. We asked our listeners to give us basically a small homework assignment, and we asked them to give us their favorite player, their most improved player. Well, actually, let's just do this. Biggest. Actually, that's not what I want to do. Okay, so favorite prospect, biggest surprise, second half riser, and disappointment. So we had a couple people said give theirs in. Again, the chat feature from the last podcast got cut off, so I apologize. But if you want to put yours in the comment section below, please do so, and we can read those for you. But this is the one from Sean, the Southern gentleman friend, who he gave his reason. So I'm not going to just say biggest surprise, Reese Olson, and why. But let me read what Sean sent over via email real quick here as I pull that up.
All right.
See here.
And yeah, Walter asked a question. How old is Christian Santana? He's 19 and 7 months right now. He's basically, he's still very young. There's still plenty of time. I think we got a little out over our skis thinking that he was going to fly through the system and be the next big hitter. And he's got some adjustments to make.
All right. So, Sean, here's what he says about Reese Olson. Most surprised or improved prospect. I would freely admit that he was on my radar only as a, quote, better Garrett Hill, almost said Grant Hill, before the season. Holy moly, was I wrong. The bowling ball sinker and the wipeout slider are absolute menaces for MLB batters. I'm not sure if he's more than a solid 3 or 4 starter, but that is an outcome before the season seemed unlikely. Most disappointing prospect. I'm not wanting this to sound mean, but after what has happened to his brother, I wanted Parker Meadows to succeed. Maybe he still will. But the projection for me has gone from good fourth outfielder to possibly an everyday left fielder in the seventh hole to wondering if he will ever get consistent at bats in the majors. The chase rate is just as a non-starter, and that 265 or 268 batting average with 330 on base percentage goes from that to 225, 279, 401 in a New York minute when Dylan Cease is throwing you his array, or even a compliment pitcher like Pablo Lopez. I want to be wrong, but it feels like more and more he's a guy ends up like a 40 player who eventually part of a package goes elsewhere. And number three, the prospect will rise. This isn't a hot take, but I'm a J Hen truther. Anyone that could walk the first 110 times in 600 plate appearances is 100% my jam. Maybe he doesn't have the natural home in the field. How about DH him when Eric Haas has a day off from leaving nine guys at base? Just a thought. But I'm a believer in the potential to hook some liners into the pen at Copa and doubles into the alleys with better, quote, running the bases speed than we identify as stealing bases potential. Call me old fashioned, but getting on base has tremendous value as we add another and better pieces to this lineup. And anyone with an on base percentage of 400 ceiling is a nuclear weapon. So that is Sean's. Yeah.
I will say I want to shout out to Jerry here because Jerry listened to it was Cody's most recent podcast, the Turning the Corner pod, right? And they had mentioned that Cody had heard or that he thought the Tigers wanted Parker Meadows to improve his chase rate. That was the reason he's still in Toledo. So Jerry went and looked it up. Said, "What's his chase rate?" And found it was like 3% below league average. Better, I should say. So the average is like 31%. Parker Meadows is like 28%. I don't know exactly how that translates to the big leagues, but it's I don't think chasing is a huge issue with Parker Meadows really. I don't know really what the issues there are other than he wasn't producing for the first couple months of the season, and I think I actually attributed to him just not swinging enough. That was my take because his strikeouts went up as soon as he started producing more. So I think he was just swinging more and hitting the ball hard more. But I will see. I don't begrudge anybody for who they find disappointing or who they're excited about.
No, that's a good poll by Jerry too. Jerry's again legend here. From Alex Kotas, favorite prospect Cole Keith, biggest surprise Justice Bigby, second half riser Wilmer Flores, and biggest disappointment was Ty Madden. And Jerry Carroll, who left a comment, who left a really nice long comment on our YouTube. First and foremost, thank you for that comment from our last show. He says favorite prospect, and he left his reasons too. So it's another comment, but you can find that their favorite prospect Roberto Campos. He said it was kind of torn between that, and rightfully so. Biggest surprise was Kyle Montero. Second half riser Jackson Jobe, and I liked his explanation on why Jackson Jobe. And biggest disappointment was Christian Santana. So with that in mind, Chris, I'm going to ask you the same question. Who is your favorite prospect, your biggest surprise, second half riser, and disappointment? And also, if you want to add in something else, because I know that's unique to you, by all means. Like favorite guy who hit opposite field home runs. I don't know.
Oh, well, no, I mean, I think, there's not a whole lot, out of order here. I mean, it's hard to not be impressed with Colt Keith, right? Like he's just been so good. And I think, I threw up Tyler Madison too as a guy who's been one of the better performers this year. I don't think the relievers get a ton of, when you're a reliever in the minor leagues, you don't get a ton of hype just because that's the way it is. But Madison has been striking out a ton of guys. He's up to 98. He just gives up a couple too many home runs. You hope you can get that ironed out. And he's kind of a turbo version of Blake Holub, who I've talked about a bunch. They're both same arm slot, same kind of stuff, but Madison throws a little bit harder. So both of those guys are kind of fun to watch perform. Let's see, we got disappointments. I think, I mean, we talked about them. I think Santana, Pacheco, Dylan Smith, Ty Madden a little bit. Like, it feels bad saying that about Ty Madden because he's been fine. It just he hasn't dominated or taken that step up, so I find that a little bit disappointing. And we haven't talked about this, but I do think that Andre Lipsius this season has been pretty disappointing when you consider that he spent a month and a half into AAA last year and put up like a 122 WRC plus. He was up. He was hitting 300. He was hitting for power. He looked like a guy who was going to be in the big leagues, and he had a solid spring too. And then this year, I don't know if he is trying to hit for more power to justify. Maybe he feels like he has to because they've been playing him at first base, right? Like maybe he feels like he needs to hit for more power. But there's more balls in the air. The average is down. The WRC plus is like 80 something, and yeah, he hasn't performed to the because we've been Lipsius fans for a long time. Uh, Rogelio particularly was like driving that bus, and it looked really good at this time last year when he's in AAA. Maybe not this time, but at the end of last year he's in AAA producing. Like, okay, this is a big leaguer, and so far this year he hasn't. But maybe what he went on the IL for has been bothering him all year. Who knows? Maybe he's got Riley Green secret leg fracture. I'm really throwing out some random stuff at the wall right now. I probably shouldn't, but I'm just saying he's been a little bit disappointing to me. And what was it on biggest rise or biggest surprise?
Yeah.
It's got to be Bigby, right? Like,
Yeah.
19th rounder. I remember watching him. I'm sure we put him in like the daily prospect recap many times, but I never thought he'd be. I actually, what I wrote down his WRC plus by month this year to talk about. So in April it was 175, in May it was 157, in June it was 162, and in July through just 7 games it's 245. He's just been incredibly consistent and performing well, like to the point where you can't really ignore him. If he's going to hit 380 or whatever with power in Double A, there are not a lot of non-prospects who do that in their first taste of Double A. Some guys eventually get there, like Jacob Robson was crushing Double A by his 4th go around, right? But there are not a lot of nobodies who do that. So you have to be, I think, excited about Justice Bigby, at least just as a guy who kind of came from nowhere and seems to be at least a borderline prospect now.
I do like Sean's logic here that sending Lipsius down at the end of spring training, break him or force him to try to manifest results. That's true. I mean, there's times where you always hear from a player that they had a really good spring and then they get sent down and it takes them a while. This happened a couple times with Kirk Gibson back in the 80s before he made the Tigers, is that he would have a good stretch and then they would send him down to Evansville and then he would regroup. So that's totally feasible. I mean, in terms of everything that he's been able to do defensively, and at spring training, him and Parker Meadows both had a fantastic. But again, that's just why spring training doesn't matter.
So did Nick Maton, right? Like,
yeah,
it's
we did get a question about Nick Maton coming back up. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. Definitely.
It wouldn't shock me if he's the first guy called up from Toledo. If they need an infielder, it wouldn't shock me at all if it's Nick Maton. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing we do often. We try to. I feel like we understand this more than, say, the average fan, that there are people, these prospects we talk about and say are disappointing or they're playing poorly. They are still human beings, and they have things going on in their lives. And certainly when you get that close to the major leagues, I imagine it's very hard to not press to try to do, like, if you're trying to hit 6 home runs in every game, right? Because you want to get there. You're so close. Right. And I don't think anybody's immune to that. Like, you could be a guy who you tell yourself just one game at a time, but it's tough if you go out there and you're trying to do one game at a time and you go 0 for 8. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that would get in your head pretty quickly. But maybe baseball players are built differently.
I definitely agree with that, because it's one of those things where it could be a nagging injury, it could be anything, and then that's why we're never going to say, "Oh, that guy sucks," because that's just ridiculous. These are human beings, and I hate how sometimes you see some of the stupid comments on Twitter. It just makes no sense. But so as far as some of the players that I was thinking about and putting in the context, these categories that are, again, favorite prospect, biggest surprise, second half riser, disappointment. Cole Keith, of course.
Second half riser.
Yeah. He's gonna bat 400. No, another prospect I've really been a big fan of all season long, is watching his descent, is Kyler Montero, because of his evolution and from high West Michigan to now. I think that's a fun story to see, especially because he has some of the best numbers, like some of the more advanced metrics. Hopefully he stays as a starter. And if he's not going to be a starter, then, 2-pitch mix of that 3,000 curveball will do just nicely. Thank you very much. But either way, that's one of my favorite stories, because I just, selfishly, I would like a Tiger International pitcher to be good. They've never really had one. And don't tell me Felipe Lira was any good, because he wasn't. I mean, as much as he went out there every 5 days. But and then another story too. But it's really uh, Justin Henry Malloy only because I put that in the sense that he's gone out there and it's nice to see an investment on a trade for once for the Tigers to work out. That's why. I mean, in the sense of you talk about how many times the Tigers got fleeced. The Justin Verlander deal comes to mind, except for the exception of Jake Rogers. But you're seeing a guy who's producing at a really good level. So for that small level, So
Yeah,
all right,
and I
George
think it's
Jurgens. Okay, he was here all 7 starts. Okay, 7 starts. Him and there's another international guy too that oh God, I can't remember the guy's name. Figaro, same
Figaro.
thing. Yeah, Figaro. Yeah,
He was cousins with somebody too.
yeah.
But I think we talked about. I think Figaro actually started in the Dodgers system,
Yes, he
but
did.
but
Tiger signed him as a
yeah,
free agent.
no, I think Malloy is a good one too. I think one of the things there is that he got off to such a hot start that people were like, demanding he come up to Detroit immediately, and it looked like the Tigers absolutely fleeced Atlanta. And then he came back down to earth, and now he's been holding his own for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But it's easy to forget that this is really his first extended playing time in AAA. He was up there for what 8 games last year, a week or so. He started last year in High A, so he's doing just fine in terms of his development. And yeah, I think just because he's not hitting 350 anymore, you might feel slightly disappointed, but that really is still one of the better prospects in the system. So that's a good one. And on Montero, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you should probably plug your article if people haven't already read it.
Yeah,
The
I should.
article where you interviewed Cutter Montero. I don't know if anybody else has done that.
No,
Certainly
I
not done
mean,
it in English and Spanish.
yeah. There's somebody did an interview recently with Brett Hurdler. You can check out too, but it's
Look at
not as in depth. But
Sergio Guillermo Moscoso. He brings out
Guillermo,
that's a pull. Moscoso threw a perfect game, I think, or no hitter in Connecticut way back in the day, and then he
wow.
ended up pitching. He ended up pitching for Oakland, I think, for a while, but I don't remember how he even got there. I have
Was
to
that in
look that up
2018?
now.
He did that for. Was that in 2018? He did that for Connecticut?
No, this has got to be like 2012.
Oh wow. Okay.
Let me.
We said that name. I'm like, why does that sound so familiar? But yeah, that was. Man, that's a throwback. That's a real throwback. I think that's when they were even called the. Oh man.
They weren't Connecticut. They were Anianta, right?
Yeah, Ante. Yeah, yeah.
Let's see.
That maybe that's when he was in Ante
Anianta.
New York. So
So, oh yeah. So as a member of the Anianta Tiger, 2007. Woo!
wow.
Guillermo Moscoso pitched his second perfect game in New York Penn League history in a 6-0 victory over the Batavia Muck Dogs on July 15th, 2007. Almost exactly 16 years ago. And then
That's
here we go. That's right. He went to the Rangers along with Carlos Mello for catcher Gerald Laird in 2008.
wow.
And yeah,
Yeah.
he had a decent big league career. 1722, 4.27 ERA, 215 strikeouts.
And ironically enough, or Gerald Laird would be the manager of Connecticut only for a month after getting fired.
I don't even did he even manage for a month? I thought he was announced and then they didn't
Or-
let him manage. But
yeah, yeah. That was
um,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
The one I didn't, I guess I didn't do. Or you're probably not done with your list, are you? Sorry, I forgot to do my second half person. But
Okay, no, it's okay. So biggest surprise, of course. I mean, Justice Bigby would be up there, but another one too is Chris Myers, and I say that because he went out there, he lost weight, and he looked much better. He looked in a lot more shape, and he's gone. So far, the Double A adjustment's been kind of a hit and miss, but still, that came as a surprise because Myers really. I don't want to say it was like more or less an afterthought, but the see he put the work in and everything, and he's got power when he does connect. That's to me a good sign, and I think that came to surprise anybody. If you'd have told me that Chris Myers would be in Double A before the end of the first half, I would have told you were crazy. So, and to answer the question, have the Tigers ever developed an international starter? The answer is no. Not really. No. I mean, again, so Felipe Lira was the only one that he pitched 4 seasons, but everybody else has been maybe, I want to say, a combined less than 50 starts put together, something like that.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me. We talk about it like we think Sandy Baez made one start, and
No,
Gregory
I looked
Soto.
that up. So Baez never started. So I double
He
checked
came
that.
in relief his one
Yeah.
game. That sounds right. And then Gregory Soto started a decent amount of games as kind of an opener, right? He
Right.
never. Yeah, it's it's not been a strength for your organization, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what was it? So the last so we got the second, or let's both go with the second half, and then I'll go with the disappointment really part of it, because I think I've hit the disappointments quite a bit. My second half riser, I think it's gonna be somebody like somebody that we may not be familiar, like Iverson Leonardo. I think is going to be a name that will rise up a little bit more. Currently, he's in complex league, but I think he's gonna, if he gets to Lakeland and does some damage, I think he could be a riser. And the other name too that I think is gonna rise up a little bit more is, I know it sounds really like I know it sounds like a cop out, but I really think you're gonna see a lot more from a guy like in terms of like from a pitching standpoint, because you can do pitchers and hitters really. So for a pitching standpoint, I just say, but I think Wilmer Flores is going to continue. Somebody mentioned him earlier, and I think that's a good candidate because he's been bulldogging it the entire year and he's been pretty well. So I'm interested to see if his velocity increases as summer goes on. I know that was one of those things he was trying to work on to get better at, but I think him alongside another pitcher who I think is going to get in terms of like an old riser through the system. Yeah. Um, somebody like I'm gonna stay with Olaf again. I think Olaf again's gonna continue to surprise people.
I like it. I yeah, I mean I think mine kind of my pitcher is kind of a cop out, but I'm gonna copy I don't know who it was, but it's for me it's Jackson Jobe. And that's it's not fair because he barely pitched in the first half, right? But man, he's just like I look at the data down in Lakeland, and I look at it for the first handful of starts where he was with the Flying Tigers, and it's just bonkers. Like it's bonkers pitch data that nobody in the big leagues has. It's a fastball that averages 96, 97 with 2600 spin, 2600 RPM spin. It's ridiculous. Like a Garrett Cole fastball, and then a slider with 3,000 RPMs and a curveball with 3,200 RPMs and a cutter with 2,900 RPM. Like it's in a changeup that's nasty, all this stuff. And throughout those starts, he was getting zero swings and misses. It was so fun. I'm like, what is going on? How can this stuff not miss bats? And then his last start against St. Lucie, he only pitched 2 2/3 inning, but 13 swings and misses. Just threw in 7 with the fastball, 4 with a slider, 2 with a changeup. It's like, all right, I think he's dialing it in now. Like, when that kid figures out how to pitch, and I think it probably will happen relatively quickly. We saw the progress he made last year. Like, when I mean relatively quickly, I mean it wouldn't shock me if by the end of this season he looks like a dude who should be pitching in Double A, even if he's not. Um, and I think he's going to have a pretty impressive second half if he stays healthy because the arm remains ridiculous. So that's like I said, it's kind of a cop out because he didn't pitch much in the first half, but
No,
whatever.
I don't think it's a cop out though, because when we saw him make his first start in Lake or West Michigan last year, he blew away Pete Crow
Yeah.
Armstrong, who's one of the better prospects in Major League Baseball. I think there's something to that, Chris. I really think that, and props to Alex too about Wilmer Flores, because he was when he put it out there like that, it made perfect sense to me,
Hmm.
because we haven't seen Wilmer Flores in, as to use a Dragon Ball Z quote, final form, if you will. Sorry, I've been
Yeah.
with my nieces and nephews. They're starting in the Dragon Ball Z, so I've been getting questions about it all of a sudden. So, oh, nice. So first and foremost, thank you. If I could now, oh, I almost did this squat, or I almost did this drop on poor Harrison.
You don't know anything. You don't know squat.
That's not the one I wanted to push. So I went to go push it. I'm like, whoa, wait. So, let's see here. Oh, okay, all right, here we go. All right,
Exquisite.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So his question. We did get a couple questions about the draft. We can maybe grab those, like touch on those in a second. If we, I thought maybe at the end we'd just kind of speculate on where these players are going to go and
Yes. And here's your Harrison question. If players are eligible to be drafted, don't they get drafted? Can they be signed by MLB clubs? I saw the Tigers sign a guy they didn't draft, Cole
Yeah.
Turney.
Yeah, you can sign undrafted free agents. They do it every year. It's the number of them has grown a bunch since the the 20 round draft. We were just talking about Wilmer Flores. He was an undrafted free agent that they signed for. I think it used to be $25,000 was the max you could do. I think you can go more now, but I don't know how much more. I have to look into that because I recall that I want to say the Braves signed a kid last year from Michigan, and it was for he was a high schooler that didn't get drafted, and they signed him for it had to be more than $25,000. I mean, I don't know why you'd fork out because he had like a decent scholarship offer. So I have to look into that and get back to you. But yeah, you absolutely can. And that was kind of the question I think Stan had for us. But I just want to finish with my other second half riser, and I have to bring him up because I've been driving the bus. But this Josue Briseño,
You should.
I just who knows? Maybe he'll continue in the Florida Complex League and he won't do anything. But he's hitting 383 through 20 games, 10 doubles, a triple, 3 homers, 12 walks, and 15 strikeouts. Maybe a couple more strikeouts than you'd like to see, but it's hard to complain about 14 extra base hits and 12 walks in 20 games. And he is catching a little bit. He is an enormous 6'4" or whatever, 200 pounds
Holy
already.
crap, that guy. He was built like a tight end.
He's a lefty in terms of obviously left-handed hitting. So I just think like when you're hitting like that in the complex league, you got to at least get a taste of low A ball later in the year. And if he does, and he doesn't completely wash out or struggle, then I think you've got a pretty prospect on your hands, even if he is a left-handed hitting first baseman, because the power production has been there, the walks are there. Like, but again, it's complex league, so you don't want to do too much. But I'm kind of throwing it out there that I think he's going to continue to excel this year and maybe come up to low A and do a little damage.
That'd be awesome. Seriously, that'd be awesome. So quickly, my disappointment when I had was Zach Hess, because this is a guy a couple years ago during the pandemic was pitching at Comerica Park. The possibility of being called up here. Now he's injured again, I believe.
Yeah, he was touching like 97,
Yeah,
98, maybe even at Comerica. Like it looked like a really uncomfortable at bat there during the and there was even a bet with his agent, right? About like if he hits 100, somebody has to
the agent, the infamous agent who was also
Rachel Luba, right?
Yeah, Rachel Luber, who is Trevor Bauer's agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird situation too.
We saw him a couple times this year, and his fastball was topping out at 92, and then he's back on the injured list. So that's really unfortunate. I don't know exactly what happened, but it's not great.
As far as Dylan Smith going second half, we have no idea. And honestly, no, excuse me. We do have an idea, and that is it's not highly unlikely right now because the Tigers are very, very quiet about it. And usually our source would say something like he's coming back soon, but I haven't heard a thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it was like we said, it's a forearm or elbow issue, which is usually a precursor to. Unfortunately, what probably is happening is he probably needs some kind of elbow surgery, and he's probably electing to rehab and try again, which almost never works, unfortunately. And then you get the Tommy John, and then you're losing a year and a half to 2 years instead of 1 year to a year and a half. But pure speculation, right?
Yeah,
that's one where we don't really know. So,
and in terms of batting wise, disappointment real quick. I mean, really, Andre Lipsius does come to mind a little bit too, but other than that, I mean, I've been more disappointed with some of the pitching performances. Pacheco, we mentioned earlier, and Santana, like Christian Santana, like just talking to him earlier in the year, he was so confident about coming in this year, and so it could have been one of those things too, where maybe he thought he should have been at a higher level, and it just kind of messed with him a little bit because there was speculation that he was going to start the season in West Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, Campos did. You thought that Santana could as well, but yeah, it's tough to see a kid go out there and hit 215 last year, which is not great, but you thought, okay, he's going to improve on that, and then come out this year and hit 130.
All right, let's end the podcast with where do we
Stan.
think everybody's going to start?
Well, we did have the Stan questions that you.
Oh
sent
yeah,
me,
Stan.
right?
Go ahead and answer Stan's question. That was a really good question.
I have to find them real quick. Let me look at.
I think I texted it to you.
Yes, you did. So I'm looking for it now. All right, here we go. So first question: does the drafting team have the ability to negotiate with a possible draft pick prior to naming their pick to lock down whether or not they will accept the money the draft team is willing to spend on that draft slot? The answer to that is yes. I don't know if it's a negotiation, but it's usually like, hey, will you take this? And the advisor will ask the player and say yes or no. That's about the extent of it. I don't think there's any kind of. I mean, maybe when you have the first overall pick, you can really negotiate with everybody. I think the Pirates did that, but when it comes down to it, you're kind of on the clock there, and you got 5 minutes or whatever, so you have to make a decision. But there are negotiations like that, right? It's just not super complex. Like I need a home suite and a cooler full of frozen fish. Like it's not, you're not getting to that level. It's just like, will you take this money? Yes or no? And the second question was, secondly, let's say a draft team decides to pick a particular prep player in the 11th round, but that prep player refuses the drafting team's offer. Does the drafting team have the ability to use that money that was refused from to spread around the remaining draft choices of rounds 12 through 20? And the answer to that is yes. That is specific to the second half of the draft. So the first 10 rounds have specific slot numbers, and those specific slots go to your bonus pool total. If you draft a kid in the first 10 rounds and don't sign him, you don't get to use that money elsewhere, and which causes issues sometimes because I just heard about this on a different podcast. They were talking about the Reds drafted, I think, the year they drafted Hunter Green, they also drafted Tommy Mace, and they had a deal with Tommy Mace, but they couldn't sign him because Hunter Green's team waited until the very last moment so they could get as much money as possible. And so that kind of screwed the Reds there. But after the 10th round, you get $150,000. That's the flat rate for every pick from round 11 through 20. And then anything you give a kid after that goes towards your bonus pool. And so we've seen that the Tigers, I think there was announced that the one catcher they took from Canada was getting a $400,000 bonus, or maybe $450,000, which would be $300,000 over the slot. So they have to get that from their bonus pool. But if you take a kid there and he wants, $600,000 and you don't have that, you don't have to sign him. You just give your money to whomever else is there. So it's less troublesome to take a player like that in the 11th round or 12th round. That's why you see a lot of high school players still going in the 11th round, comparatively speaking, to like rounds 12 through 20. Although the Tigers did it in the 12th round, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to answer that, because I was actually the second part. The first part I was pretty sure about. The second question about the money side of things, because I remember we talked about this offline the other day about it was on Discord too. That was going on about the conversation about how money could be spent, and you're doing all that on your chart. So yeah, props to you being
my spreadsheet.
Yeah, the spreadsheet. So
we'll see how. My guess is I think I guessed a little too high in some places, because if they're giving the catcher $300,000 over, I think they probably had more money than I realized.
All right, so let's breeze through this real quickly before we get out of here, and that is the draft picks, where they're going to go end up in 2023, and if they're going to play this year. And there's a possibility too that some may not play. So Max Clark, I think starts off. I think he'll be in Lakeland before beginning of September. That's just my guess.
I would agree. The Scott Harris was on 97.1 today, and he talked about Max Clark and how people are going to like him, and how much they're going to see him. Like when they see him play later like in a couple weeks, he said. So I think he'll be in the complex league to start. That's usually how it goes. And I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month in the complex league, and then probably bumped up to Lakeland if he hits like everyone thinks he should. You got the clip there? Is that what you're giving me the?
Oh, no. The reason why I was doing that is because, the Scott Harris thing. Well, he said, I don't know where this speculation, or I'm paraphrasing, about the college bats. I'm just like, you might be listening to the podcast because we talked about that extensively.
Well,
but then,
everybody talked about that.
Yeah, I know everybody talked about it. I was just Chris, try to manifest that.
Yeah.
You
No,
have somebody
yeah.
that, I mean, he.
I wouldn't. I'm not gonna put it past him. But yeah, I think Clark and McGonigal are both guys who are going to head right to the Gulf Coast League and probably hit their way out of there. You hope so. If they don't, it's no big deal. But you hope that they hit their way out up to Lakeland within a month or so. Max Anderson, I would assume that he's another guy who might get a couple at bats in the Complex League before going to Lakeland and sort of playing second base, first base there. Maybe he's a guy who performs well enough to get to West Michigan. I doubt it, but I don't know. We'll see.
I could totally see him starting and sticking around in Lakeland for a little bit because of the consistencies of their infield,
Yeah, and
and
he
with
could
Graham
fill
being
in.
out.
Yeah.
So
And then Wilson and Rucker, I feel like those are guys who are they're gonna stick in the Gulf Coast League probably
yeah,
for at least a handful of. I mean, I just don't. You don't want to push a pitcher really. He might not even pitch. It's tough when high schoolers have been down from pitching for probably 2 months now. So they might not ramp them back up. And it'll be interesting to see how Harris handles that. But Rucker, I think, will probably go there and play pretty regularly.
So beyond that, let's go with. I mean, in terms of going towards the later rounds, Jaden Ham, I could see I could see starting this season in Complex before we go over to Lakeland. Bennett Lee, Jason Peck, and Diaz. I think Diaz is going to stay strictly Complex, but I think with Lee and Peck, we could see him at Complex for just a minute before they go to Lakeland.
Yeah, and those are both sort of polished college defenders, if you will. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to go straight to West Michigan or head to West Michigan quickly out of this. That the college players they took were not the high-ranking types that like Young and Soretti made it quickly. But Soretti wasn't all that highly touted, and he made it up. So who knows? But yeah, I think you're right. As a catcher, I could see Lee maybe coming up just because he's a catcher. They want him to catch. They just want a catcher. But yeah, beyond that, I think it's going to be a big infusion of interesting players in the complex and in Lakeland, which is definitely what they needed. And then there'll be some people bumped up to West Michigan, but I don't know if it's going to be super exciting.
I'll take a long shot here. I think the draft pick in round 16, Danye Evans, he makes the West Michigan by the year. That's just irresponsible speculation. I'm throwing it out there, but I like his stuff.
He was a reliever, so you could see that happening.
Yeah, West Michigan's always going to need some relievers. So, on that note, thank you so much for listening to the Tiger Minor League Report. First half recap. There'll be a written article, like I said, tomorrow, coming out sometime in the morning or in the afternoon. And we're back with the second half of the season starting tomorrow, as the Erie Seawolves will be hosting the Hartford Yard Goats. And so, in terms of scheduling, if you're interested in seeing where Toledo will start, so Toledo will be starting the season on the road at Buffalo, with the 3-game series starting on Friday before they come back home and take on Lehigh Valley. West Michigan. So West Michigan,
Lansing, right?
Yeah, they're in Lansing, so they're not too far from us. I don't know. I might head up a game this weekend over there.
Are they in Lansing or are they hosting Lansing?
I think they're hosting Lansing. I'm double checking right now.
Yeah, they're hosting Lansing. But yeah, I mean, that was my speculation that it could actually be Job pitching this weekend. We haven't heard anything about that, but it felt like he was getting close to getting bumped up. So we'll see.
Yeah, right now, let's see who do they? I'm looking at the pitching matchup right now.
TBD.
So yeah, it's always a good sign of things to come. If
everybody's TBD except for Toledo.
Yeah.
Ah, boy.
Oh, well, Erie's got their rotation set out for the weekend, don't they?
Not on the app. They might have it already announced it, and it's just not uploaded on the app or whatever.
Okay.
But
I was gonna say because I'm pretty sure that they did a tweet about it earlier today, maybe.
I can see
that. Yeah. So cannot talk. Lakeland is the only team I'm not really sure who they start off with, but let's see here. I'll do that real quick while I do that.
Yeah.
Lakeland at Tampa. So Lakeland will start the season against Tampa. So thank you so much, guys.
There might actually even be footage that leaks out from that because there's a one Yankees guy who goes to all those Tampa games.
Oh yeah, the John Brody dude.
Yeah, there might be something, but
we'll see.
Anyway, yeah.
So thanks so much for listening. We appreciate it. Next week probably Sunday we'll be doing Motor City Metrics podcast. So John will be back from Uper will be back from vacation. John had a night off, so more content, more stuff like that. That's going to be more to come on Motor City Metrics. So once we get everything going with those guys back, but thank you so much. Seriously, the last couple of days have been fantastic, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great night, everybody.
See you. Thanks.
Yeah, freeze frame.